We took a week off of the series after introing it, and now we're back in. And so I wanted to just spend the first little bit to kind of just do a little bit of review as far as what is the gospel. So we didn't hit on these things exactly explicitly, but they came up in our conversations. If you remember, take you back a couple weeks ago, we were looking at kind of a couple different ways to explain the gospel or to walk through the gospel, whether it was from kind of the kingdom of God perspective or from the life of Jesus. And in both of those stories, ways of telling the gospel, you saw these kind of 7 themes kind of radiate throughout this story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. These themes of sin, repentance, grace, mercy, adoption, obedience, and restoration. And they kind of show themselves in different ways depending on how you tell a story. But these are going to be kind of the core building blocks that we use throughout the rest of the series to kind of demonstrate and illustrate how the gospel impacts different parts of life. And so I want us to think about this, think about the gospel as a lens at which we're going to view different aspects of our life. Like for today, we're going to be looking through the lens of the gospel at work. And to illustrate that, I brought glasses. So I'll have a volunteer from each table here. There's a lot going on that screen, but I'll leave them here, whoever wants to put them on. You can see there's a lot of stuff here. Does anyone without the glasses able to look and see, make any sense out of this nonsense up here? There's a lot going on. Go ahead and put the glasses on and look and tell me, can you see a message up there? Not at all. Wait. Oh no, I practiced this a lot at home. Yeah.
Did it see it better without it?
Mom.
All right, I'll try it.
I was like, I'm just waiting for that.
My illustration's going to fall flat on his face if this doesn't work out.
Like, maybe shift the lights off. See if that would help.
Well, we'll see what happens.
No,
Yeah, right there.
No,
Yeah, no, it's worse.
you seriously can't.
Oh, what a shame. I worked so hard on that.
I mean, look and see what we're seeing.
Better if you inverse your colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure enough, that's awful.
Supposed to get the green glasses?
No, I mean, it was definitely this,
Oh, wow.
but I just didn't get to test it on this screen. So, well, never mind then, I guess. Well, the trick was supposed to be that there's a Bible verse under this. So, what a shame. You know, the best laid plans, right? I know I'm tempted to try to make it work now, but I can't. So, the idea is that when you put on these red glasses, what fades away is these colors of red and yellow and the pinks and all that goes away. But the purple is what's supposed to stay, but I think the purple got color shifted too much when it got put up on the screen. So, boo-hoo. But the illustration still carries if you use your imagination. So, when you put on the lenses of the gospel, what happens is all of the stuff, all of these voices and these narratives coming at you from other places start to disappear and fade away. So what hustle culture, it says, this American dream of work harder, work 3 jobs, get a side hustle, you have passive income, all of these things coming together tell you your work is meant to be this. All of a sudden that fades into the background because you put on the lens of the gospel and it shows you the truth that's at the center, which is that all of us are a new creation in Christ and that none of us sees this world the same way anymore because of the lens of Christ, which is the essence of what the Bible verse says up there that you guys can't see and I can't see. But that's the idea that would have been really cool if my magic came with me to church today. But instead, we will continue on with sadness. So what I want you guys to keep in mind as we go through this series is the topics that we're going to be covering are very kind of big, broad topics in a lot of sense. Like when I just say we're going to talk about the gospel and work today, there's no way that we're going to be able to delve into every little corner of how the gospel impacts work. We're going to be doing this in more of a survey sense of kind of look at it from 100 feet up, do our best to equip you guys with tools in order to engage and think through this as well, and how the Bible informs the way we look at these different themes. I was just with some pastors the other day, and if you ever need some people to come up with some goofy illustrations for you, go hang out with pastors for a few minutes. But one of the guys was saying, when he teaches these type of survey type things, he says, the idea is if I had brought a golden nugget in here and said, hey, I found this little gold nugget in the Canadian River, I bet there's a lot more, we would all want to go back to the Canadian River and start panning for gold and find all the rest of the gold. That's the idea of this series, is that hopefully we're able to shine the light on a little bit of a nugget of what the gospel has to say about X, and that you guys can go back and continue to dive in deeper into what does the Word of God say about this as a whole. If there's something that comes up during our discussion today or during the teaching that we don't answer, or you have a question that you feel like, this isn't exactly on the topic, but it came to mind, I put question cards on your table that you can, if you have a question that comes to mind, jot it down in there. You can drop it in the offering box in the back at the end, or during if you want to stand up and go, if you're one like me, and if it doesn't happen right now, I don't remember. That's an option too. But just want to make that available to you guys. And on April 7th, we're actually going to have a Q&A night during church service. So we're going to take these questions that we have kind of lingering from the series, take a minute to sit down and kind of work through them together so that we can make sure that we are able to move forward in confidence with what we know and how to apply it and all of that stuff. So those question cards will be on your table every week. On the back side of it, it's also a prayer card. So if you just don't have a question, but you just need some extra prayer, feel free to write a prayer request on that. I'd be happy to pray for you this week too. Okay, that's all of the housekeeping stuff that I have, and I have no more magic tricks to go sideways. So with that, we can go ahead and move into the rest of our lesson. I have a table question for you guys. I want you guys to discuss this at your table. I want you to brainstorm a definition for the word work. All right, what did you guys come up with? Whoever wants to go first. Okay. There you go.
Okay, so energy applied to something that has a purpose to get a result. That
Ooh.
does not necessarily mean that it's a satisfying for the person that's actually doing the work, but it's going to satisfy somebody.
Yeah. Right. The person doing the work may not get the benefit, but it might be for someone else's benefit. Yeah. Sure. I'm not eating that. Good. Hey, that's a good one. Just read me that first part one more time. I like the way that you guys said that.
Okay, energy applied to something that has purpose and gets a result.
Man, that sounds like so Webster. Like, good for you guys. Unless you looked up Webster, in which case, points off, I guess. But that was good. Okay. I wondered. Okay, what do the copycats have over here?
Okay, purposeful effort to accomplish something.
Purposeful effort to accomplish something. Very good. Yeah, really good job, guys.
Purposeful effort to accomplish something.
I like it.
See, that's good. When you guys are coming at it to about a similar conclusion, that means we're probably getting close to the truth, right? I can tell you put the work to it. That was good. I like that both tables stayed away from, I think, the biggest pitfall, which is that work equals occupation. That work equals employment. Because it's absolutely employment is work, but work is probably a bigger category than just whatever your job is. And so I think you guys did a really good job of incorporating that and including that. And I like the fact that you guys both included purposefulness in your definitions there, because I think that's exactly it. I do not have any sort of better definition than what you guys had. I think you guys really captured the essence. What I want is to just spend a minute before we go into what the Bible has to say about work and inform that. I want to just spend a minute kind of looking at this from the worldly perspective, from the secular perspective. Because what I want us to do in this whole series, but especially today, is to spend time looking at what does the world have to say about this topic, and then what does the gospel have to say about this topic? Because then I think that will help us start to kind of see through some of the layers here into the truth of what the gospel says about this. So when we look at kind of the worldly perspective on work, there's kind of two main camps that I see, kind of overarching categories of how work is treated or perceived. And one is work as a means to an end, and the other one is work as an end itself. So as a means to an end, that would be things like I work so that I can have comfort or status or provision for my family or whatever that looks like. It's not the work itself that matters to me, it's what I get from the work. Then, if it is work as an end itself, then we're talking about that your work is your fulfillment, your purpose, your identity, your calling, those sorts of things. It's not what you're getting out of that, it's what that thing is to you. And I think those are broad enough categories to get the vast majority of perspectives there. And you probably have all sorts of particulars that come to mind to fit into those two generalities of different people who you're thinking of, different characters on TV maybe you've seen even that exemplify some of these mentalities. But I think it raises kind of an interesting question when we look at it this way. And this is a question for the whole room, I just want you guys to answer out loud, is work something good that we should pursue or something bad that we should avoid? Because we just talked about the worldly perspective and it's a means to an end or an end itself, which could maybe push you towards bad. But what do you guys think? Is work something good we should pursue or something bad we should avoid?
Seems like, well, at one point I read in the Bible, it said, you don't work, you don't eat.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of depends, like on what work you're doing. So,
Yeah.
it's criminal.
Right. Do you work for the cartel or do you work for the public school system? Like it's a little, I think that's a good answer. What do you guys think? Other thoughts?
It also kind of depends on if there's work before the fall.
Yeah. And don't beat me to the punchline. That's where we're going to go here in a minute. But any other thoughts?
Yeah, I,
Take it, Dan.
from my generation's point of view, the idea of trying to avoid work is silly.
Yeah.
You know, you work, you choose, you've got some choice in what you go about it and how you
Right.
go about it. But, you work until you're old enough to say, I'm done.
Which you are. I think that you guys just illustrated perfectly what I was hoping you were going to illustrate, which is so good after our glasses faux pas earlier. So this is an improvement. I want to show you guys what I'm going to call the view of work spectrum. And I think you'll see there's a lot of stuff that maybe falls in between this stuff, but you can kind of look at it as some people will say all the way down there, it's work is bad and you should try to do the least amount of work possible. That's that person that Dan was just speaking out against, right? This is the idea of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of passive income, but basically how can my money make me money, or how can I have something that's working over here on the side that basically if I can get enough of these streams of passive income, then I don't have to work a day in my life because everything works for me now. And so the structuring your life in a way that says I should avoid work at all costs because it's bad. The other extreme over here would say, no, work is good and it leads to a better life. And that might even come into play as far as work is a means to an end or an end, right? That it's my better life is due entirely to my work, maybe would be the pitfall of this side. And then in the middle, you've got the two over here that might say, hey, work is a good thing, but hey, thank goodness it's Friday, I enjoy work, I'm glad I'm here, but I cannot do work all the time. If my life revolved around work, I'd lose my mind. And then slightly over there, work is just a necessary evil. I gotta have it for the world's sake. Like you said, you don't work, you don't eat, but it's still bad. So that's kind of how I split it, was one side that says fundamentally bad, one side that says fundamentally good. The question is, what does the Bible have to say about this? How does the Bible inform this spectrum and tell us where along this multicolored line we should fall? And I think the best place to go is where Alyssa's already pointed us to, which is in the book of Genesis. So go ahead and open up, it won't take you very long to find, the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1. And we're going to just take a peek here together at verses 26 and 27. I encourage you guys, even though it's going to be up here on the screen, I encourage you guys to keep it open with you because it'll help you in some of our conversations and stuff going forward as well. So Genesis 1, 26 through 28. Would someone be willing to read that for us? Perfect. Thanks, Dan. So what you can kind of even see here at the very outset, the creation of humanity, he has already brought up this kind of idea of work. He doesn't use the word work here, but this word dominion comes up. You can see it, or I mean, in your translation, it might say something like rule or authority, that sort of thing. But what kind of images come to mind when you hear this word dominion or rule or authority? Manage. Ooh, that's a good word for that. Crooked voting machine. I'm going to need more context, Dan. That makes no. Barbara says you do not want more context than that. What else comes to mind? Sure, a kingdom. This kind of idea of someone having to oversee or rule, or something along those lines. Absolutely. Is this a passive word or an active word? It feels very active, right? This is not, when you say dominion or rule, it is not the image of the king that's sitting back in the throne and watching the world go by and the kingdom happen. Dominion almost invokes this idea of go and take it, right? Go and rule it. Go and, the word that we saw earlier, subdue it, right? That it said down there. These concepts are integral in understanding the nature of our work. Thankfully, this is not the only time that this story talks about our role that God has given us. Move into the next chapter here, go to Genesis 2:15, and you can see an even more explicit message here. So it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it." To work it and to keep it. And so this is still, it's Genesis 2, which means sin has not entered the world yet. So this is perfect creation. This is in the garden. And we have an assignment given to humanity to work and keep the garden.
Mine says dress it. I've never seen it.
Oh yeah? Interesting. So the words here that are used, it's actually, I love it. So the word for work, to take care of it, that's good. The word is avoda in the Hebrew language for work it, which is the same root as the word for slave or servant. So it's really slave the ground. That's the concept of work. And then keep it, which is, I believe it's the word shamar, but it is this idea of to guard and to protect. These are the same two words for work and for keep that are later used when talking about the role of the priests in the temple of God. It is their role to work and keep, work and guard, or in this case, garden and be the guardian of what they're over. So the priests in the temple, and here, Adam and Eve in the garden. And I think that this shows us something really important about the nature of work when it exists prior to the fall, that sin hasn't entered, and this is still part of the expectation. In fact, I think it's so important that we should have another conversation about it. So at your tables, I want you to spend a little bit of time discussing what you guys think might have been the point of having work in a world where you have everything you need and there's no hunger, there's no death, etc. what's the point of humans having work in a world like this? Take a minute to brainstorm at your table, discuss through it. All right, guys, tell me about what you guys talked about at your tables. I'm not necessarily even looking for one concise answer, just kind of want to hear the conversation that happened. Shoot some stuff off.
You go first this time. We talked about that we're made in God's image, and therefore He creates, He works, He brings order from chaos, He has purpose, therefore so do we.
Yeah.
And like if you're going to be a parent, that's automatically work, and so He's also prepping them to do things,
Yeah.
create things.
That's really good. I love that, guys. Good discussion over there. What about over here?
We included some of that. One of them came up just as enjoying God's creation. So when you're in the middle of working
Yeah.
it, you're enjoying it. Needing to work to maintain
Mhm.
the creation because it can overgrow, it could become a disaster. Dressing it, protecting it, like what we talked about, priestly roles and what God does for us. It's just again responsibility and a way to value His creation to have that purpose.
That's really good. Good job, guys. I think you guys hit on some really important themes that I wanted to bring out if you guys didn't. So I'm glad that you guys did. This idea of, I really like the way that you guys said it over here of God in His very nature is creative, in that, we even call those first 6 days of creation His creative work. That He was working when He was making and creating the world. And that part of the way that we get to image God is by reflecting that same creative capacity in a different way, in a different level, but it's still there and it's still important, right? This idea of bringing order from chaos. And we could sit and talk all day about in a pre-fall world how much chaos was there really, but the point still stands. Like I spent the last week plus working in the bathrooms at our house of doing remodeling and refinishing and all that stuff. It's paint, it's paint, it's pulls, it's light fixtures, it's mirrors, all of the things. And it was a lot of late nights, and it was ultimately really enjoyable for me in a lot of ways. I really do like working with my hands, and I will tell on myself that there's been several times since I finished the guest bathroom when I just kind of walk in there and I just look and I just smile. I'm just like, one, it's done, and that's a good feeling. But two, to be able to look and say, man, there is order that's been brought to this space that there wasn't before. And even like literally just looking and saying the functionality of the space, the aesthetic of the space, it's improved. And that brings me joy all on its own. And I think that is part of because of the way that God made us is to image Him. And God in His very nature is creator, is creative. And we get to walk that out. It is us getting to walk out that image. Yeah, Brian.
You made me think of like when God created the world, like He literally said every time He created this, created that, and it was good. Like when you said that, it's like when we work, we should, whatever we're doing, it's like that's good what I'm
Yeah.
doing. Step back, because like when I mow my yard, like I did that.
So you see the lines from the mow. It's like, man, that is good. Oh,
Point out something that
yeah.
Adam and Eve didn't create sin. Sin existed before the fall.
Yeah.
You look at Satan. Satan had already messed things up.
Sure.
So I think we look at we have this mentality of earth your paradise and all that was great and you didn't have to do anything. No, that's not the way it works.
Sure.
That God has creation set up a certain way.
Mhm.
That you work, you reap the rewards.
Yeah.
Whether Adam and Eve were living in sin or not, the rules are still the rules. The
Sure.
universe is still a way of work.
Right.
It's God that brings chaos to order.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he put man on the planet was to bring that chaos to order. And if
Yeah.
you don't, it goes back to chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. And it's certainly murky and debatable about how much sin was there before the fall. Because you raise a very important point about, well, there sure was Satan crawling around out there, and he wasn't so squeaky clean. But what we do see is the effect of sinfulness had not yet tainted human beings. We do not, the capacity was there. We see that for sure. We're about to go there actually. But the taint of sin had not yet affected them for sure, and at least had not affected a lot of the created things as well. In fact, let's not flirt with it anymore. Let's go look at it. In Genesis 3, 17 through 19, this is the curse that, well, I won't say that God places on Adam, but is a result of Adam's sin. And so I'll go ahead and read this one for us. It says, this is from Genesis 3, 17 through 19. It says, and to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Work is not the same anymore. Work is deeply costly now. And what is definitely indicated is that the nature of what work was prior to this, of the keeping and the tending to the garden, while there was still responsibility to be done, it did not require the same amount of effort that it was about to. The sweat, and that the ground would fight back. And it's interesting because you can draw some really neat parallels here out of this passage of, especially out of this last line, for you are dust and to dust you shall return. This idea of God forms man out of the dirt, the dust of the ground, and breathes life into him. Now, obviously, this is talking about Adam's eventual death, that you are from dust and you're going to return to dust, you're going to die one day. But also, I think what's interesting is to look at the fact that the dirt that they are working, from which Adam came from, is rebelling against Adam. That has come out of the dirt, is tending to the dirt. Now the dirt is fighting back and is eventually going to take him. And that is the characterization that we see of what work is now. It has been tainted, and our whole perspective on work has been tainted because now work is necessary for survival. When before the fall, it was not. Adam and Eve were not supposed to die. They were supposed to work forever, and they were not working so that they could continue to live on, because God was the one who was providing for them their source of life and all of that, and they were not having to toil for that. You see, we'll get there in a minute. I won't get out ahead of myself. But that now they will never be able to work again without the reality of, if I don't do this, I die. In some way, shape, or form. If someone's not working, then we are dying actively. And that means that selfishness has now entered the equation of work. Remember the word that we talked about before that God uses when he puts them to work and keep the garden. So this idea of a servant or a slave, right? Work has built into it this idea of you are serving someone. Right down in the very word that God used when he gave it to Adam and Eve. Even in the perfect state of the garden, when you work, you are serving someone. You guys brought that out even in your definitions, especially you guys in the way you said it, of that there is someone who is getting a benefit from this, whether it's you or someone you're working for or whatever. And that was true then, before the fall as well. In a perfect world, our work was meant to benefit God as an act of worship. Not because God needed us to be working, but because the very nature of our work, of imaging God with our creative capacity, reflecting his creative capacity, brings him glory. And when you bring God glory, that is worship. That's making much of him. And so, now that sin's entered the equation, all of a sudden our work is not only for God anymore. We have this constant nagging temptation in the back of our mind to make work about ourselves. Remember when we talked about work as a means to an end, right? Sometimes work is a means to a very important end. Do you love your family? Man, then you should really work to take care of your family. Whether you're a stay-at-home parent, and that is the parenting and rearing up of your kids, it is the work of maintaining order in the household. Whether it's I had to go get a job or a vocation or whatever so that I could provide the means for my family to survive and to thrive and to flourish, those are great things. I would never say that you should not desire those things. But when those things become the ultimate reason for why you work, then we've robbed God of his glory that was always meant to be the purpose for our work. I think we would be going too far astray in our conversation of work if we didn't bring in this conversation of rest as well, and what rest tells us about the nature of work. Go ahead and turn your Bibles to Exodus 16, 14 through 30. It was too long for me to put on the screen. I'm sorry. Chewy question, right? A lot to chew on with that question. I heard some really good stuff come up, heard maybe some questions as well that came out. So I just want to kind of hear from you guys. What did you guys come up with? What did you guys not come up with? You have questions about? Fire it off.
Your turn.
Stuff, tougher. We did have a lot of questions because we don't really grasp it, especially in our society today. But we did come up with, it's lining up with God's creation of 6 days and then he rested. Therefore, he's providing for the 6 days and then resting on that seventh day. But then it's also teaching us that he will be our provision. He will provide us with provisions as we need it. And he wants us to learn to trust and to lean on him. So it's like, God will provide you every day. You have to work to go pick it up for that day. But then on that seventh day, I need you to do a little more work for the 6 days. So the seventh day you can rest.
Right.
But it's my provision. It's what I tell you to do. I want you to do it. There's a reason to do it, whether you understand it or not. We need to learn to just lean on it. And it's like, okay, whatever. Took them that first week to figure out, I don't.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get anything because I wasn't obedient.
Right. That's good.
You need to lean in and trust.
Yeah. I think you hit on some of the really core stuff. I want to hear from this table and then we'll process together.
One of the things that I took away from what's in that passage, you look at the seventh day and there's some that went out to gather. I can't help but think maybe day 6. Well, yeah, they had twice as much as they needed for the day, and then they may have looked at it as like, oh, God blessed us with twice as much, and they ate it all.
Bonus.
They didn't save any of it for the next day. And so when we kind of go through life and we're working, and then we've got excess. It's not necessarily so that you can just glut it.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Wait. Because you're gonna have to rest. There's times that you sit back and I'm not gonna work today. I'm not gonna work because this is a time to rest and recover, and God's already provided through the work that we did ahead of time to.
Yeah, that's good, Chad. That's really good.
And rest is an act of worship.
Oh, absolutely. That's another great point as well.
Rest is an act of worship.
Absolutely. I mean, if you guys even think back to our 1 John series, I know I keep calling back to it, but one of the things that we talked about was the way that we show love to God is through our obedience. That is one of our acts of worship to him, is through our obedience. When he commands these people rest on the seventh day, it is an act of worship for them when they rest, when they don't get up to go look for the stuff that's not going to be there. You guys pulled on all of what I think are the most important threads in that, which is the idea of worship, the idea of provision, the idea of obedience. Those are all, I think, really, really important to pull on. Now, what can be sticky about this, and I heard some of the conversation over here about how does this apply to today, this idea of the Sabbath day. Is it Saturday? Is it Sunday? If I'm not resting on whichever day I say it is, am I being disobedient to God by not resting on that designated day in the rhythm of creation? I would push back against that some and to say, let's not miss the forest for the trees. It's much less, and Jesus highlights this to us, it's much less about the day that you rest on. It's much more about the posture of rest and worship. So Jesus constantly is breaking the Sabbath law in the Gospels, whether it's healing someone on the Sabbath, whether it is feeding people on the Sabbath, whatever, these different classifications of things that are work, and that the Pharisees are very quick to point out are work. Jesus continues to say, you missed the point. And so let's not miss the point as well, and to focus on, it doesn't matter which day of the week it is. In fact, I would push a step further and to say what we see demonstrated here in the Sabbath day is a callback to creation, is a callback to that day 7 of creation. And if you remember, on the 7th day of creation, there is no end to that. It doesn't say, and it was morning and it was evening the 7th day. Like it did on all of the other days. It established a pattern. On the 5th day, and it was evening, it was morning, the 5th day. Like constantly, this thread. And then you hit day 7. On the 7th day, God rested, and it was good. Boom, just like leave it hanging out there. Meaning, this existence in the garden is a perfect 7th day of rest. The creation of God is done, and now this is the part that like makes my brain hurt. Adam and Eve were working in a restful state because the world is at rest, and yet there's still a command on them to work and keep the garden. How is that possible? I think what Scripture is pointing us to here is that the perfect, restful, worshipful state of work is when we are not working for our own survival. It's when we're working for the glory of God. It's when we're focused on that. Which means there's a way for us to work today that reclaims and restores the original purpose for rest and work, which was to say, hey, I'm going out there and I'm working for God today. I'm bringing God glory when I do this. And I'm not violating my command to rest because I'm finding rest and provision in Him. That's what's at the heart of the Exodus story here. Is it's not so much about this idea of, hey, go take a nap. It's Saturday, go take a nap. But the idea was, guys, you are not providing for you. And guess what? You've never been providing for you. God says, I've been providing for you the whole time. Day 7 is just a way when I make it painfully obvious to you that you depend on me for everything. You might have been patting yourself on the back for going out and doing a good job of picking up all those little wafer loaves out there. But it wasn't your work that provided for you, that allowed you to survive. It was my provision that allowed you to survive. The Sabbath forces us to see that. I love the way, if you remember, I've used their stuff a little bit, but the Bible Project, we use their videos sometimes. I was listening to what one of their guys had to say about it, and this quote really kind of jumped out at me. He says, it's like we're so addicted to working for our survival that we need to quit that work cold turkey for a day to be reminded of what the actual necessity for continued existence and survival is, which is reliance on God. It's like we've become work addicts. We've become so addicted to providing for ourselves and surviving that we have to quit so that we can see and be reminded, it's not me. It's never been me. It's always been God, and I forgot. But when I stop and I say, well, I'm not going to make that much money today because I'm resting. I'm not going into work today. I'm resting. Or the house ain't going to be as clean today because I'm going to rest. That's a moment where you are depending fully on God for provision of each and everything because you're not the one going out and putting bread on the table. Literally in this passage, God's doing that. that is an important mentality for us to capture of no, it's God providing on Monday. No, it's God providing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's not something we do once a week, it's something we do every single day. It is a mentality of Sabbath living that is reminiscent of what we're going to see one day in its fullness when Jesus comes back. Now, I once had someone tell me, well, that means we don't need vacations, right? Because we're living in Sabbath rest as Christians. And so if you're living in that, then surely you don't need to rest. Well, let's remember the already not yet conversation that we've had in the past, right? Since sin entered the world, since brokenness entered the world, since decay entered the world, we are going to continue to struggle with becoming weary and tired. And there's a whole different need for rest now that there wasn't before sin entered the world. You need to go take a nap. That's true and important. You might be working restfully and you're still tired. That's just because of the way that the world is after being tainted by sin. So one day, Jesus is going to come back and he's going to set right creation, create a new heaven, new earth for us to enjoy, in which case it's going to be restored to like the Garden of Eden, and we're not going to be subject to decay and to the need for that type of rest. And instead, we'll get to live in a perfect Sabbath state of worshipful rest in Him. I know that was a lot to say in my fast voice, so sorry if that was a lot to process. This might help some. Moving to Colossians 3:23. We spent a lot of time in the Old Testament on that. Let's shift to see what does the New Testament have to say about redeeming work. Colossians 3:23 through 24 says, "Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ." Now, we use this verse a lot without the fullness of the passage here. Like I just did not include the fullness of the passage here. I'll fill in the blanks. This is Paul talking to slaves, to bond servants, saying, you have to work. It's your whole existence right now is working to pay off the debt to whoever your master is in this point. And whether it was a debt slave or whatever that looked like. And yet Paul makes the same encouragement. And I want to remind us that we are all, in a certain sense, enslaved to work because we need it for our survival. Like we talked about already, this is part of the nature of how we live now, is that you need to work in order to live.